And then obviously, he gets caught on tape, saying some derogatory racist things. And
that was the Undertaker, finally breaking his silence on Hulk Hogan. The racism, the backstage betrayals, the sex tape scandal, the family chaos. For decades, Taker watched Hogan's dark side unfold while the world worshipped him as a hero. But now he's revealing why Hogan deserved to pay the ultimate price. Let's break it down. The immortal icons fall from grace. What happens when wrestling's most iconic hero becomes its most controversial villain? For decades, Hulk Hogan stood as the embodiment of everything professional wrestling represented to millions of fans worldwide. He was the man who taught us to say our prayers, take our vitamins, and believe in ourselves. The red and yellow warrior who body-slammed giants and inspired generations. But behind that larger-than-life persona of Hulkamania existed a far more complicated reality. One that the Undertaker, the conscience of professional wrestling's locker room, has finally decided to address in the wake of revelations that have shaken the foundations of wrestling history. On July 24, 2025, the wrestling world lost Hulk Hogan at age 71 to cardiac arrest. Yet even in death, the controversies that plagued the final decades of his life continue to spark fierce debate across social media platforms, wrestling forums, and within the industry itself. And nobody is better positioned to speak truth to power than The Undertaker, a man who spent over 3 decades in WWE's locker room, who witnessed firsthand the politics, the betrayals, and the consequences of ego unchecked. This isn't just another retrospective about a fallen star or a sanitized tribute that glosses over uncomfortable truths. This is the story of how wrestling's greatest icon became one of its most problematic figures, told through the eyes of the man who represented everything Hogan wasn't: loyalty, integrity, and unwavering respect for the business that made him a legend. To understand the depth of Hulk Hogan's controversies, we must first acknowledge the monumental impact he had on professional wrestling as an art form and business enterprise. Terry Gene Bollea, who became Hulk Hogan, revolutionized the wrestling business in the 1980s, transforming it from a regional attraction relegated to small arenas and territorial promotions into a global phenomenon that rivaled mainstream sports entertainment. WrestleMania, the Super Bowl of professional wrestling, exists largely because Vince McMahon bet everything on Hogan's crossover appeal, his ability to transcend the squared circle and become a genuine pop culture icon. The man was, undeniably, a cultural force who opened doors for every wrestler who came after him. His matches drew unprecedented audiences. His merchandise flew off shelves faster than it could be stocked, and his catchphrases became part of the American lexicon. But as The Undertaker would come to learn throughout his legendary career that spanned multiple generations of performers, the brightest stars often cast the darkest shadows. And in Hogan's case, those shadows were long, deep, and revealed a pattern of behavior that stood in stark contrast to the heroic image he projected to millions of adoring fans who saw him as the ultimate good guy. Perhaps no controversy damaged Hogan's legacy more severely than the 2015 racism scandal that led to his termination from WWE. When leaked audio from a 2007 sex tape revealed Hogan using the N-word repeatedly while discussing his daughter Brooke's dating life, the fallout was immediate, severe, and unlike anything the wrestling industry had witnessed before. WE, the company Hogan had helped build into a billion-dollar empire through decades of main event matches and pay-per-view draws, didn't hesitate. They fired him within hours, erased him from their website as if he'd never existed, and removed him from the Hall of Fame that he'd headlined. But the audio revealed something even more disturbing than a single incident of racist language caught on tape. Hogan expressed discomfort about his daughter dating a black man and admitted he was racist to a point. Language that suggested this wasn't merely a slip of the tongue or an unfortunate moment, but potentially reflected deeper prejudices. When he finally addressed the scandal publicly, Hogan attempted to explain the context and his state of mind.
It was probably the worst day of my life when I said that 8 years ago. I had bottomed out. I was having some problems with the marriage and financially and the kids, of course. And I was kind of mad at my daughter, and there was a weird situation where I said what I said.
The Undertaker's response to this controversy was measured but firm, refusing to make excuses for the inexcusable while acknowledging the reality of the situation.
And then obviously, he gets caught on tape, saying some derogatory racist things.
But Taker went further, addressing not just the racist remarks themselves, but what they revealed about how modern audiences would react and what expectations existed for public figures in the social media age.
In this day and age where all of that is such a hot button deal. Like I don't know what you expect. Like
I think
people are
also,
gonna, they're gonna react, and they're not gonna react in a positive way.
The Undertaker's words carried tremendous weight because they came from someone who had witnessed the inner workings of wrestling's locker room for decades, who understood the politics, the personalities, and the price of fame.
I think also the other part too is, I think the fans themselves have found out what kind of locker room guy he was, and it means a lot to the fans that you're a good locker room guy as well. You know what I mean?
This wasn't just about words spoken in private being exposed to public scrutiny. The scandal affected Hogan's relationships with black wrestlers throughout his career, creating divisions that persisted even after his eventual reinstatement. Kofi Kingston, a former WWE champion and one of the company's most popular performers, admitted he was indifferent professionally, but personally hurt by Hogan's comments, choosing not to associate with him despite WWE's forgiveness. Mark Henry, a WWE Hall of Famer and the world's strongest man, noted significant division in the locker room, with some wrestlers questioning whether Hogan's apologies were genuine or financially motivated. And while WWE reinstated Hogan to the Hall of Fame in 2018 after he made public apologies and engaged in community outreach programs designed to educate about prejudice, the damage to his legacy was permanent and irreversible in the eyes of many fans and fellow performers. When Hogan appeared on Netflix's Monday Night Raw in February 2025, just months before his death, the crowd's reaction told the entire story of his fallen reputation. Instead of the thunderous ovation he once commanded that could shake arena rafters, he was met with resounding boos from a Los Angeles audience that hadn't forgotten his transgressions and refused to pretend they didn't matter. The Undertaker, who was present that night and witnessed the hostile reception firsthand, had a telling response when asked if he felt bad for the man who'd once been wrestling's biggest star.
Did you feel bad for him? No.
That simple, direct answer spoke volumes about how far Hogan had fallen in the estimation of his peers. When pressed further about his lack of sympathy, The Undertaker elaborated with words that would resonate throughout the wrestling community and beyond.
I got feelings. I got feelings for people. Like, sometimes in life, things come back.
But the racism scandal, as damaging as it was to Hogan's reputation and legacy, represented just one chapter in a book filled with controversies that would shock even the most devoted Hulkamaniacs and force a reckoning with the reality of who their hero truly was beneath the muscles and mustache. Betrayals, politics, and the price of fame. If the racism scandal revealed Hogan's personal prejudices and private thoughts, then the 1986 incident where Hogan betrayed Jesse the Body Ventura's attempt to unionize WWE wrestlers exposed something perhaps even more damaging to his legacy within the wrestling industry itself: his willingness to sacrifice his fellow wrestlers' well-being, safety, and financial security for his own gain. In the mid-1980s, ahead of WrestleMania 2, Ventura rallied his fellow performers to demand better pay, health insurance coverage, retirement benefits, and basic worker protections that performers in other entertainment industries took for granted. Wrestlers were classified as independent contractors without the protections afforded to employees, despite working brutal schedules that destroyed their bodies and shortened their lifespans. Ventura saw an opportunity to change that oppressive system. The plan was simple, but required solidarity. If the entire roster stood together as one united front, they could force WWE to provide basic worker protections and health care that could save lives and prevent the financial ruin that claimed so many retired wrestlers. But when Ventura approached Hogan, the biggest star in the company and the one whose support could have made all the difference between success and failure, Hogan did the unthinkable and committed what many consider the ultimate betrayal in wrestling history. He went directly to Vince McMahon, bypassed his fellow wrestlers entirely, and informed the boss of the unionization effort, allowing McMahon to threaten immediate firings and effectively kill the movement before it could gain any real momentum or leverage. Ventura discovered Hogan's betrayal during a 1991 lawsuit against McMahon, where McMahon confirmed under oath during sworn testimony that Hogan was the informant who'd ratted out his brothers in the locker room. The revelation destroyed their friendship permanently and irreparably. When discussing the incident years later, Ventura recounted the precise moment he learned the truth.
And he's the one that ratted me to Vince when I tried to unionize. I found that out under federal deposition when Vince was put under sworn, and he didn't hesitate at all.
The impact of this betrayal cannot be overstated and continues to reverberate through the wrestling industry today. When asked about the possibility of reconciliation decades later, after both men had aged and supposedly mellowed, Ventura's response was unequivocal and spoke to the depth of the wound Hogan's actions had caused.
What?
Can't trust him. I'm not friends with anyone I don't trust. I have to have a trust with someone to be their friend.
This betrayal had lasting consequences for every wrestler who came after, affecting generations of performers who suffered without basic protections. To this day, WWE wrestlers have no union, no guaranteed health insurance through the company, despite suffering injuries that require extensive medical care and limited protections, despite the extreme physical toll of their profession that leaves many crippled or addicted to painkillers by their 40s. Ventura's assessment of Hogan's betrayal was damning and cut to the heart of the matter. He betrayed every single wrestler on his roster and every single wrestler who came into the business after him. The unionization failure meant that generations of performers would continue working without the basic protections that could have prevented countless injuries, bankruptcies, addictions, and premature deaths that plague the wrestling industry. Hogan's pattern of backstage politicking and self-serving manipulation extended far beyond the union betrayal that ended any hope of collective bargaining. His relationship with Bret the Hitman Hart exemplified his use of creative control clauses to protect his spot at the top, regardless of what made sense for storylines or who deserved opportunities. At WrestleMania 9 in 1993, Hogan reportedly influenced McMahon to change the planned finish at the last minute, winning the WWF Championship from Yokozuna in an impromptu match after Hart lost the title in the main event, denying Hart a planned rematch and extended title run that could have elevated him to the next level. Hart accused Hogan of refusing to lose cleanly to him later that year when they were scheduled for a program, claiming Hogan told him he wasn't doing business with him and lied about future plans to string him along. Hogan himself addressed this controversy years later, though his version of events painted Hart as unreasonable.
Bret Hart, who thought I basically sabotaged his career because Bret thought he should have been the greatest wrestler that ever lived, and he said it was my fault. I won the belt from Yokozuna at WrestleMania.
Hogan continued, explaining his perspective on the controversial WrestleMania 9 finish and what transpired afterward.
Where Bret lost, and Bret told me to go in the ring and wrestle him, and I won the belt right after Bret wrestled him, and then the deal was for me to drop it back to Yokozuna.
But Hart's version told a completely different story, one of broken promises, political maneuvering, and Vince McMahon backing Hogan's version of events over Hart's recollection.
And then Bret got in my face. He goes, "Hey, you're supposed to drop the belt to me." I said, "No, I'm not." Vince looked at Bret and said, "Bret, that's what you thought you heard." So ever since then, he hated my guts and wanted to kill me.
This incident exemplified what became known throughout the industry as Hulkamania politics, where Hogan allegedly buried talents and sabotaged pushes to maintain his dominance at the top of the card, regardless of who deserved opportunities. Hart has repeatedly called Hogan a liar and criticized him as very limited in the ring. Harsh accusations that gained credibility and supporting evidence as more and more stories emerged from other wrestlers about similar experiences with the Hulkster's backstage manipulation. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Hogan would use his influence with Vince McMahon and leverage his creative control clauses to ensure he remained on top, regardless of what was best for the company's long-term health or his fellow performers' careers and livelihoods. Perhaps no relationship better illustrated the complexity and personal cost of working with Hogan than his connection with Macho Man Randy Savage, a friendship that devolved into an 8-year silence. While their on-screen Mega Powers feud from 1988 to 1989 was iconic and generated enormous revenue for WWE, real-life issues arose from jealousy and paranoia over Savage's then-wife, the beloved Miss Elizabeth. Savage was reportedly paranoid about Hogan's close friendship with Elizabeth, leading to accusations of inappropriate behavior that would poison their relationship for years and create an uncomfortable atmosphere backstage. When discussing his biggest personal beef in wrestling, Hogan acknowledged the depth of their falling out.
Who was your biggest, personal beef with outside the ring?
It was Macho Man. And when he lived on the beach here, we were together every single day.
The rift between Hogan and Savage ran deep, fueled by personal drama, professional jealousy, and allegations that were never fully explained to the public.
And then when he went through a divorce, he thought I had something to do with it. That turned out to be like an 8-year don't talk to each other thing, which we finally got on the same page about 6 months before he passed away, thank God.
Tensions allegedly boiled over when Savage punched Hogan, giving him a black eye before WrestleMania 9, an incident wrestler Scott Steiner later corroborated in interviews. Though Hogan claimed it was merely a jet ski accident, the incident fueled persistent rumors of a deeper rift involving Elizabeth that would never fully heal, even after their supposed reconciliation. Their friendship soured further after Savage's divorce, and many credible voices in the wrestling community believed Hogan played a significant role in blackballing Savage from WWE WWE returns during his later years when Savage desperately wanted to come back. Yet even these backstage conflicts and professional betrayals pale in comparison to the personal scandals that would rock Hogan's world and expose the troubled, messy private life behind the carefully constructed public persona of America's hero. Private scandals and a legacy in question. While Hogan's professional controversies damaged his reputation within the tight-knit wrestling industry and among hardcore fans who followed Backstage news, it was his personal scandals that truly shocked the mainstream world and forced casual fans to confront the yawning gap between the character and the man. The sex tape scandal that emerged publicly in 2012 didn't just embarrass Hogan and damage his family relationships, it led directly to the racism controversy that would ultimately define his later years and sparked one of the most significant legal battles in media history, with implications far beyond wrestling. In 2007, a sex tape was secretly recorded featuring Hogan with Heather Clem, the wife of radio personality Bubba the Love Sponge, without Hogan's knowledge or consent. When Gawker Media published portions of the explicit tape in 2012, Hogan filed an invasion of privacy lawsuit that would eventually award him a staggering $140 million in damages and completely bankrupt the once powerful media outlet. The case, notably funded by billionaire Peter Thiel due to his own personal vendetta against Gawker for outing him as gay years earlier, sparked widespread debate about privacy rights versus freedom of the press and the power of wealthy benefactors to destroy media companies. But beyond the legal implications and First Amendment questions, the tape's very existence raised deeply troubling questions about Hogan's personal life, his marriage, and the company he kept with people who would betray him so completely. When addressing the scandal publicly, Hogan acknowledged his responsibility while explaining the emotional context.
Take a deep breath. You have to make sure that you're honest because you have to be accountable. And, you address it. And at the end of the day, pray to God that those that love you and the people close to you, like your friends.
When pressed about the specific circumstances surrounding how the tape came to exist and why he was in that position, Hogan admitted culpability while attempting to contextualize his terrible choices.
And when asked, at the end of the day, you realize it was a horrible choice. I am accountable. And any excuse I make, whether it was a rough time in my life or the people that were there were my friends and they kind of baited me to it, none of that matters. It's just that, you're accountable and be honest.
The emotional toll was clearly evident as Hogan discussed how this scandal affected him more than any other controversy in his tumultuous life.
Never. And I've been through a lot of stuff. I've been through a lot of stuff, with the federal government back in the 80s, the whole steroid controversy. The divorce, the car wrecks. I've been through so much stuff, but never have I ever been this embarrassed, and never has my world been turned upside down in such a fashion.
The steroid controversy Hogan referenced dated back to 1994, when he testified under immunity during Vince McMahon's federal trial for steroid distribution within the wrestling industry. Hogan admitted under oath to using anabolic steroids for nearly 14 years from 1976 to 1990, contradicting earlier emphatic public denials, including a memorable appearance on the Arsenio Hall show, where he downplayed any drug use. His testimony helped secure McMahon's acquittal by clarifying that McMahon neither supplied nor mandated steroid use, but it exposed the rampant and widespread use of performance-enhancing drugs in wrestling, with Hogan estimating that 75 to 80% of wrestlers he knew in the 1980s used them regularly. This revelation severely damaged Hogan's carefully crafted image as a wholesome role model who succeeded purely through training, prayers, and vitamins, the very foundation of Hulkamania itself. Hogan's 2009 divorce from Linda Hogan was equally messy, public, and filled with damaging revelations involving serious accusations of infidelity with Christiane Plant, a friend and co-worker of their daughter Brooke, that made the betrayal even more painful for the family. In her explosive 2011 memoir, Wrestling the Hulk: My Life Against the Ropes, Linda alleged years of emotional and physical abuse, describing specific incidents where Hogan tore her shirt in anger, threw lamps across rooms, held her down on beds with his hands around her throat, and created an atmosphere of fear in their home. Hogan vehemently denied these serious allegations and filed a defamation lawsuit against Linda, though the outcome was never publicly disclosed, strongly suggesting a possible out-of-court settlement with confidentiality provisions. The divorce left deep, lasting scars on the entire Hogan family, contributing to years of painful estrangement between Hogan and his daughter Brooke that would never fully heal. Brooke Hogan's recent revelations about experiencing extreme verbal and mental abuse since childhood that frequently turned physical added another deeply troubling troubling dimension to Hogan's complicated legacy as a father. While she carefully clarified that her decision to go completely no contact with both parents was based on their individual treatment of her rather than taking sides in their war, her public statements painted a disturbing picture of a deeply dysfunctional family dynamic that completely contradicted the wholesome, all-American image projected on their popular reality show, Hogan Knows Best, that millions of families watch together. The family tragedy deepened significantly in 2007 when Hogan's son Nick was involved in a devastating car accident while driving under the influence in street racing, leaving his passenger and close friend, John Graziano, with catastrophic, life-altering brain injuries, requiring round-the-clock care for the rest of his life. The incident would have been devastating enough on its own, but Hogan faced widespread criticism and public outrage for recorded phone comments made during Nick's jail time, suggesting Graziano's permanent injuries were somehow part of God's plan, remarks many found deeply insensitive, tone-deaf, and insulting given the horrific circumstances and the Graziano family's unimaginable suffering. Yet perhaps the most revealing insight into Hogan's true character came not from any single scandal or controversy, but from The Undertaker's measured, thoughtful assessment of how fans and fellow wrestlers gradually came to understand who Hogan really was beneath the persona. When The Undertaker reflected on Hogan's trajectory and the public's changing perception, he contextualized it within the broader cultural moment.
We grew up seeing Hogan as this great thing,
bigger
and then
life Americana kind of deal, and then obviously, he gets caught on tape, saying some derogatory, racist things. And
The Undertaker's words carried particular weight and authority, given his hard-earned reputation as wrestling's conscience, moral center, and his decades of first-hand observation watching Hogan operate backstage.
And I think also the other part too is, I think the fans themselves have found out what kind of locker room guy he was, and it means a lot to the fans that you're a good locker room guy as well. You know what I mean?
That's probably a good point.
When asked directly about Hogan's rightful place in wrestling history, despite everything that had come to light, The Undertaker acknowledged the complicated reality of separating the man from his undeniable contributions to the business they both loved.
I think for what he did for the business,
I don't think it changes.
He has to be on the Mount Rushmore for what he did for the business.
Following Hogan's death on July 24, 2025, the wrestling community and fans worldwide grappled with the extremely difficult question of how to properly remember and honor a man whose contributions to the industry were absolutely undeniable, but whose personal failings, prejudices, and betrayals were equally significant and couldn't be ignored. Some pointed to his extensive Make-A-Wish Foundation work, having fulfilled more wishes than cultural icons like Michael Jackson, Mr. T, or even Mickey Mouse at various points in his career, bringing joy to terminally ill children in their darkest hours. Others noted his substantial charity work, generous donations, and the genuine happiness and inspiration he brought to millions of fans worldwide across multiple generations who saw him as their hero. But many thoughtful observers, particularly in minority communities and among younger fans more attuned to social justice issues, simply could not and would not separate these positive contributions from the racism, betrayals, lies, and personal scandals that marked his later years and revealed his true character. Thanks for watching. If you had a good time, keep the adventure alive by clicking on one of the suggested videos on your screen right now for more amazing content.